Hello and welcome. This is episode 23 of the Story Impact Author Interview Series, and I'm your host, Lisa Tolles. I started this series because I wanted to create a venue for authors to talk about their books, and because everyone loves a good story, especially me. But this series is really about the story behind the stories, the creators and visionaries, about what their process looks like, where they get their inspiration, and the purpose that drives the creation of all their books. I want to know what brings them back to that keyboard and the empty page day after day. And as well as being a host for this series, I also write crime thrillers, and you can find my books on Amazon and on lisatolls.com. All right, so let's dive in today. Author Anne Louise Bannon's husband says that his wife kills people for a living. Bannon does write mostly mysteries, including the Old Los Angeles series, the Freddie and Kathy series, the Operation Quickline series, and oh my goodness, she really writes so much. She writes standalones, and she has worked as a freelance journalist for magazines and newspapers, including the Los Angeles Times. I want to talk about that today. She and her husband, Michael Holland, created the oddballgrape.com wine education blog, and she co-wrote a book on poisons. Also want to know about that later. Her latest novel is book 5 in the Old Los Angeles series called Death of the Drunkard. One Amazon reviewer said this book transports the reader to a time in Los Angeles's early days with well-researched, detailed descriptions. They said the dialogue is equally vintage with a wonderful grasp of delightful phrases that would have been popular in that era. On top of the atmosphere that it all provides, the murder mystery is well plotted, suspenseful, page turner. And Dr. Maddie Wilcox is my new favorite sleuth. So, as well as writing both fiction and nonfiction, Anne is also a speaker and a teacher with talks that she has created on plotting, building characters, and outlining. And she and her husband live in Southern California with an assortment of critters. And warmest welcome.
Well, thank you for welcoming me. I'm glad to be here. This is really going to be a lot of fun, I hope.
All right, so your Operation Quickline series has like 14 books in it. I mean, oh my God, that's a lot. Tell me about that series.
Well, it's set in the 1980s because that's when I originally wrote it, which, as you can imagine, I've been around a while. I hate calling them historicals. But yeah, I had originally written it then and then revisited it some years later and suddenly realized, there's something here. Oh, wait, I can't update it. I'm going to have to keep it in its original series. And there are originally 13 books, believe it or not. The including one that was a series of short episodes. Uh, Most of those have gone by the wayside, the short episodes, because they just weren't that good. Although I may resurrect one or two. Um, but there were 12 original novels. And then I kind of got some ideas. I rewrote the latter half of the series, mostly during the pandemic. This was my way of getting away from COVID.
Mm.
And things turned out, because thank God I'm a much better writer now than I was then. And so I had so much fun with these characters that I kind of went, wait a minute, and then kept going. So there are actually going to be a total of 15 quick lines, but we will not be done with Sid and Lisa. We're going to move to a new transition to another series because Quickline, which if you read the prologue of the first book, that old cloak and dagger routine, is going away at some point. And so now they're on overt status. They're and they're very different. They're spies, so they're living a very different situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as soon as Quickline ends, which will happen after the book 15 comes out, we'll start blogging that in September, I believe.
Okay.
And because I blog these, and they're mini serials. I was doing that before Amazon ever thought of it.
Innovative.
Do I get any credit? No. Anyway, but so we got that, but it'll be ending with Necessary Chances, and then we move into the Gold Team series after that. But yeah, Sid and Lisa, it started with this idea of a nice religious young woman having to deal with and live with a man to whom she's A, not married, and B, sleeps around like nobody's business.
Love the premise. I mean, like, as we hear people say all the time, no one wants to read about like a happy, well-adjusted protagonist. I mean, that sounds like interesting. That's a great hook. Why? Because it's conflict, it's tension.
Yeah.
Well, that's what keeps me turning the pages too as a reader.
Well, he does give it up. And they do end up reasonably well adjusted, but they get other conflicts too, because, their family's around.
Hmm.
And that just makes things more fun. And then, of course, there's the issues when things blow up with their their side businesses, how they refer to it. And the fact that they have to keep all this secret from their families,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
especially Lisa's family, who's very, very involved. And in Room Where It Happened, which is the one I'm blogging now, that's book 14. Sid is up in it to his hips with his aunt because they're investigating the cold case about his mother's murder when he was 2. And he's, trying to figure out, wait a minute, who am I? Where am I? How do I deal with this? You know?
All right, so your Los Angeles series, though, is a historical mystery series. And I was curious, how did you get started writing that? And how many books are in that series?
Right now there are 5. I've written the rough draft for book 6, and I don't know how many more there will be, but I'm just going to keep playing this one out as long as I can.
Hmm.
Death of the Zonjero actually started with my husband. It's all his fault. Bottom line. Michael is the archivist for the city of Los Angeles. In
Mm,
other words, he's overseeing all the official city records.
interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun too. And so it's kind of a long story, but back in the day, up until Mulholland, uh, Chinatown, Rape of the Owens Valley, up until that actually happened in 1914 with the California Aqueduct, Los Angeles and their farms, it was a primarily agricultural place, was irrigated, and the water came from the Los Angeles River.
Hmm.
And then what they'd done is they dug all these ditches or zanjas off of off of the river, in particular the Zanja Madre, or the Mother Ditch. The most powerful person in town at that time, who got paid even more than the mayor did, was the Zanjero, or the water overseer.
Mm, mm, hmm.
Okay, so they were digging up for a building and found some of the bricks from the original Zanja Madre. And Michael, of course, was down there like a shot, got a hold of some of them for the archives because, this is like LA history. Oh, he's all excited,
Hmm.
and with good reason.
Hmm.
So he gets that, and they start do this big talk, and he starts this big talk on how the Zanja system worked.
Hmm.
And it was very simple. You basically went into the Zanjero's office at the end of the month, paid for your subscription of water. Then you would go back the next day, get your receipt, and then the day after that, you would uh, the Zanjero's men would come out and open the sluice gate. The water would rush into your Zanja. And Michael's describing this very clearly.
Hmm.
Now, I write murder mysteries. What do you think I'm thinking?
But that water is not going to come gushing in when you open the valve and
Or that the body's going to appear.
yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what happened.
Mm.
And I will concede Michael was a little miffed when I put a body in the middle of his beautiful lecture, but I didn't do it at the time of the lecture, okay? Fair enough. Uh, it came out, and then, so I'm starting to think about this, and then I'm thinking, gee, winemaking in Los Angeles. Hmm. And then I'm thinking, Maddie Wilcox, and she starts talking to me, and next thing I know, I've got the series. It was just but that was it.
Wow. Well, what a catalyst. I mean, geez. And I think about the movie Chinatown, and I mean, like you and your husband know this history. How accurate is that movie?
Well, keep in mind, Chinatown takes place in the 30s, but yeah, it is
That
definitely
that
based.
was later. Okay.
Yeah, much later. Let's see, 34 with the aqueduct would have been opened it opened in 1914, or was it 1913? I get my dates a little mixed up, but it was early teens. And Chinatown, of course, takes place in the 30s, so that's about roughly 20 years later.
Hmm.
So yeah, but there was definitely some skullduggery going on. Mulholland was definitely uh he was the Zonhero at the time too. And he
Hmm.
was definitely prone to assuming he was right and to hell with everybody else.
Hmm. Hmm.
And which is a lot of what Chinatown was about, if I
Wow.
recall correctly. I've only seen the movie once, and I don't remember much about it.
I've seen it so many times. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Um, so thinking about audience, what do you think readers of historical mysteries want most? Because that's a very like specific subgenre of mystery. I mean, think of yourself as a reader too. Presumably you also read historical
Oh
mysteries.
yeah.
What do you think readers care about most?
Uh, the characters, absolutely, and that's the same with any mystery. I know that's what got me hooked on the Cadfile series.
Mm-hmm.
First one I read, I was not that impressed by the mystery itself,
Mm-hmm.
oddly enough. But the ability to bring not only have the good characters and all that, but also the ability to bring that era to life,
Mm-hmm.
make it a real thing. That's one of the reasons why when I am writing the old Los Angeles series, I try to include what was going on in the Pueblo at the time I'm writing. This is the 1870s. By
Yeah.
the way, it's LA's almost been around for 100 years by this point.
Mm.
People
Okay.
forget LA's been around 1781 was when it was founded. So it's
Wow.
just it was a sleepy little pueblo. Then the Americans came in and, everything went to hell.
Mm.
Literally. And but it became the county seat. It became a lot of things, and it was just very interesting to me.
Mm.
I did not want to deal with the Civil War, which is one of the reasons why I started in 1870, and I
Okay.
did not want to deal with the Mexican era because I just really didn't want to culturally appropriate. That
Yeah.
just is not appropriate for me. So that's why it's in the 1870s. But there was a lot going on in the 1870s. We had, you
Mm.
know, the in 1870 itself, we had the killing of LAPD's first police chief,
Mm.
William Warren, who was, and this really happened, he was shot in a dispute with his deputy over a hooker.
Mm.
Yeah. This was LA. It was a very, very violent place at the time, which is great because I finally find a way around the Cabot Cove syndrome, where you never want to go to Cabot Cove because there's killing every week.
Right, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't a killing every week in LA,
Pretty
but
close.
damn near every month. And in a town of 7,000, that's a lot.
So would you say historical thrillers or historical mysteries are more fun for you to write than current present day?
No,
Oh.
they're both fun. They both have fun for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love writing modern stuff or current contemporary stuff because, I can use language that I can't use in either the Quickline series or
Mm.
the uh, uh, old Los Angeles series. Maddie use a foul word? Never.
Mm-hmm.
Never. Victorian ladies don't talk like that. And Maddie is always a lady.
Mm-hmm.
But so I can be freer with my language. I can also be not sweating it out. Am I using an anachronism here?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
is crazy making, let me tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the Go ahead.
I was going to ask about your Janine Miller character in Running Away to Boston because that's still something different. That's a standalone. I mean, you write so many things as I was kind of researching this. That's a standalone thriller. Tell me about that.
Oh, that was fun. It's a tech thriller, but it's more of a mother-daughter story, which is kind of a weird thing. But and I had so much fun with that one. I had been noodling that story around for years and then finally realized it wasn't the mother's story, it was the daughter's story. And then I thought, well, gee, what if the daughter's job was to find people and her mother doesn't want her to find somebody? Ooh, what if her mother doesn't want her to find herself?
Mm.
And there's some very, so I had to come up with some very good reasons, but it was also kind of fun that mom actually started showing up. The prologue begins with mother because you have to understand why she abandoned her daughter, but she
Mm-hmm.
didn't. She didn't really. She just didn't understand, the circumstances were just really messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out sort of to the end that there was a very good reason why she didn't dare contact her kid.
Okay. I'm gonna have to read that one then. Don't tell
Oh
me
yeah.
what.
And then of course there was all the tech stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is a lot
I
of
saw that it was a tech thriller, and I'm really attracted to to that subgenre, so I definitely want to read that.
oh, please feel free. It's not all that tech. I mean, there's a lot. I got the tech correctly, but it's not. The emphasis is not on the technology because, frankly, that book would be still yesterday 3 weeks ago. So,
That's the thing. Yeah.
but it is fairly accurate, and I know it's accurate because I had three different guys, one of whom flew helicopters on Mars. He works at JPL.
Oh,
One is the was I don't think he's still doing it, but he is still an IT person, but did IT for the physics department at Cal Tech, and the third wrote Unix.
okay. Goodness.
And they all had different problems. They all had different issues.
Mm.
And getting them all together was really a lot of fun and having fun with that. So yeah, they all had different notes. And they all three caught stuff that had nothing to do with the technology.
Mm. Well, and sometimes when you have those, we so need our technical advisors with our books, and sometimes it's a
Yeah.
separate process reconciling the feedback we get. One person will say, "I really like this. I thought this worked really well," and someone else will say of the same part, "This just doesn't work for me. It doesn't fit." And I'm like, "Well, what do I do then?" And that's when, like you as the driver, has to kind of go in here and say which feels right, you know?
And there's always we always have the out in the notes. Whatever I screwed up wasn't them, it was me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not perfect, folks. But yeah, I got most of I think I got did a pretty good job with that one. It was fun to write. Everybody thinks it takes place in Boston. It doesn't. What Boston is a metaphor.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's go ahead.
I'm from Boston, so I was curious about that as a locale, but okay, now I know. Well, I
But
can't.
don't worry. Don't worry. Book six in the old Los Angeles series is Death of a Proper Bostonian.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well,
That
bring
does take place in Boston.
all right. So let's take a step back because I want to hear about your journalism career. What was it like writing for the LA Times? What types of stories did you write, and what was challenging about that?
Challenging was staying employed. But it was any kind of journalism that can be challenging. But I was writing a lot because I was writing for the suburban editions. I wasn't in the main newspaper. Although I did get to catch notes on one of the election stories, and that was such a blast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, challenging, and the funny thing is I don't think of it as challenging. It was just something that was so natural to me, if that makes sense. And it was so much fun. And I'm sure there were hard parts. I know I had one day where I had to get a story in because of this. There was this one section I was in charge of called the Best Bet, and it was basically something interesting to do in the area over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I started. And the darn stories kept falling through right on top of deadline, no less, which was really making me crazy. And that was one of the worst days I had. But, because you can't, and it hits me, you can't just leave an empty space in the newspaper. There has to be writing there. I have to find something.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great lesson, though, because it really taught me to, okay, it's time. Deadline's coming up, you write. You find something to write. It doesn't matter. I
Yep.
mean, it does matter that you get it right and you get it accurate and all that other stuff, but um you don't not do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Step up. People say, "Well, I can't imagine. Well, how do you write so much?" Well, I had to.
I had a journalist on this series as my previous guest too, Glenda Carroll, who also used to be a journalist, and I was asking her about how do you adapt from journalism to the long form of novels, and what did you learn from that? And she said that she learned a lot about deadlines and kind of like holding yourself to a schedule from journalism. What do you feel like were things you learned from your journalism career that you still use now as a novelist?
A combination of things. Story pacing.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and actually, I had been writing my own novels, not published yet, but I had been writing my own novels before I started working as a journalist. And I also learned voice from that and applied that to my journalism career.
Hmm. Okay.
But I also learned to write tight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't write my novels in the famous inverted triangle where all the news is up at top and you kind of go, least, most important stuff up here, least down. I don't do that, but I did learn a turn of phrase and how to, I mean, one of my favorite jokes was there were two leads I really, really wanted to use. One was for a a feline shelter that was coming into Glendale. I
Mm-hmm.
really wanted to write, Glendale has a new cat house. Somehow that wouldn't have gone over, but
I love that headline.
that would have been a great lead. Women who say they don't like football never sat in the end zone with a pair of binoculars, which I still hold is a true thing. But
All right, so tell me about the book you wrote about poisons, because I just have to hear about that.
okay. Well, it started way long time ago, in the early 90s as Deadly Doses. I was involved with Mystery Writers of America, had gotten involved working with the president at the time, Joyce Madison, and my co-writer, Sarita Stevens. And we are just folding newsletters. And I said, gee, it'd be really great if we had a uh, book where you could look up a poison and see that it does X, Y, or Z, or you could look up a symptom and, because you need somebody to turn blue and fall over at your
Yeah,
certain point in your
references.
novel.
Hmm.
You can look it up by symptom and ooh, have it. And so Joyce encouraged me and Sarita, who is a nurse, to write it together. And that was published by Writer's Digest Books in the early
Awesome.
90s, and then it became How Done It, Book of Poisons, right around I think it came out in 2000,
Hmm.
you know,
Wow.
and unfortunately it's currently out of print, but
Okay. No, that is really cool. And I'm just looking at kind of like the whole spectrum of like what you've written in your long career, and that's just so impressive. So at this point, I want to ask you a little about how you write your books. How much time do you spend at one sitting? Are you very disciplined? Not that disciplined? I know some things have changed in your life recently. Anything you can share about the mechanics of how you do all this?
um, a lot of it goes on in my head. I won't say this is a comparison in terms of quality. By no means am I a genius like Mozart was, but I do use everything happens up here before it goes on the screen, kind of like everything happened up there before he wrote it down.
Mhm.
So that is my style. I spent a lot of time thinking about it. It's hard to say how much time goes into a book because I'll be thinking about things for months, sometimes years, and then all of a sudden, bleh, it's there.
Mhm.
Uh, I have been trying to I've been trying to set aside 1 month, 2 or 3 months out of the year where this is where my focus is going to be. I'm going to get this rough draft done, period, end of sentence.
Hmm.
NaNoWriMo's been great for that. Let me tell you, it's a great excuse for me to say, okay, guys, I'm writing my novel now. Leave me alone. And but I'll start it. I mean, I'll let's see. Uh, I started research, hardcore research, actual focused research on Death of a Bostonian, proper Bostonian, which will probably come out sometime next year. I'm not sure when. Started that in focused research in early January 24.
Hmm.
Let that stew. I think I started, did I write that? Hang on a second. I can pull that information up. When did I open that file? Open that file because it's right there. Let's see.
Well, and I was also curious about how much time you spend like day to day writing. Do you write for 2 or 3 hours at a time, or just a 25-minute Pomodoro method, just doing short?
It's okay, yeah, that's not gonna have that date on it. It's kind of variable. It really is. I mean, I can spend all day and all night when I'm going and I'm hot. That's it. That's all I'm doing.
Mhm.
And that's why I like to have those concentrated periods where that's all I'm doing.
Mhm.
But I also have time blocked out every day for sacred writing time.
Mm.
Used to be earlier in the day because that wasn't a good time for me to be creative, but it just wasn't working out with actually getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Because I'd start writing and wouldn't want to stop.
Mm.
And then, oh wait, I needed to answer that email 5 hours ago. Oops. So but there's because I love productivity hacks, I figured out that my best times are first thing in the morning and late in the afternoon.
All right, good. So you found
I
that
found my sweet spots.
found your sweet spots for you. I mean, like
Oh yeah.
I
Oh, that's strictly for me. I mean, there's some people who, they get up at the crack of dawn and they crank it away, and I'm not conscious until noon, okay? It's just I'm a night person.
yeah.
And so it's easier for me to uh uh work later in the morning because you're fresh up, brain firing because you get that more creative time in the early morning.
Hmm.
Now I've learned to write notes if I have to, and then
Hmm.
so most of the year I'll have my other projects that I have to get going, and then I will have, hour and a half before this, that, or the other, before dinner, basically,
Hmm.
to work on whatever story I'm working on. And a lot of times that's where I'm doing a lot of the outlining. I'll take days off. I have an out and about day scheduled into my week, and I'll take that time and I'll just start writing notes. I'm kind of going back with the upheaval. I unfortunately lost my house in the Eaton fire, have not been able to write. And the worst of it was the story was already stalled when everything blew up. But it'll come back. It always does. It's just it's just tough now.
Yeah.
But and on good days I will have ideas and I'll start scribbling notes down, and I just have to put myself into a position where I can just take that time to scribble some notes down.
Right.
And then I'll start coming up with, get my notes, get my ideas. I usually use a 4 act structure, write my outline, write what I want to happen at the end of the each act, and then start figuring out how I'm going to get there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that works really well, usually.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have a few minutes left, so I want to ask you the question that I ask all guests that join me here. What would you say is your purpose as a writer, and what do you want to leave readers with after they read your books?
My purpose is to give voice to the voiceless. I always try to include somebody who otherwise would not be heard. Doesn't always work, but I want readers to come away thinking, yeah, that was a good yarn. And then, wait a minute, that was an interesting thought.
Hmm.
Death of an Heiress. there's a measles epidemic going on. And there really was. I read the newspapers. There was a measles epidemic in the Pueblo of Los Angeles
Hmm.
in June 1872. I think that's that one. And there, in fact, there's this note. Yeah, absences are up at all the schools because of the measles outbreak. Thankfully, few have died. Okay. Now I'm writing this toward the end of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We're hearing about anti-vaxxers, and I couldn't resist. I had to put the scene in where one Regina Medina, one of the Maddie's sidekick, is frustrated because one of her employees has died from the measles.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Regina's the local madam, so it's an interesting relationship, let me tell you.
I
But
see.
one of her girls has died of the measles, and she says, "Why can't they find a way to prevent this?"
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, people sit there and whine about vaccines, and I'm going, guys, I know what it was like without them. Yes, there may be some risks, but there's a greater risk not having them. And, getting people to understand that is not easy. But maybe they'll read this and think, oh, wait, that is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. We have just a couple minutes left. The last thing I want to ask you do you have a copy of your latest book? Can you hold it up?
Uh, oh,
If not,
dang.
I should have asked you that ahead of time. Don't worry about it. I'll
Okay.
flash it on the screen so people can see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Either Death of the Drunkard or Paths Not Taken. Those are the last two.
Okay. You can find Anne's books at annelouisebannon.com. And Anne, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful to learn about your interesting history and your prolific library of books. And for those of you tuning in today, thank you so much and have fun reading Paths Not Taken by Anne Louise Bannon. And we will see you next time.
All right. Bye.